Hello everyone. My apologies for doing this remotely once again, but I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Dave, I know you're putting on a great conference, and we'll need to get together at some point. One of these years, we'll have our timing right so we're in the same city together. The topic that I had picked out for this year's presentation is labeled the financial calculators. And what I thought I would do would be to spend a few minutes discussing an area of calculating history that's often overlooked by those of us in our number who are obviously more scientifically engineering oriented than we are financially oriented. And if we're familiar with financial calculators at all, it's probably the Hewlett-Packard models. I mean, the HP80 really did launch the industry of financial calculators, followed soon thereafter by the HP70, and we could probably name off the models that are the HP financial models. I'm going to ignore all of those. So what I want to look at are the non-Hewlett-Packards with an exception or two, and try to give some history as well as some pictures of what the collecting possibilities are for the non-HP financial calculators. It seems as if, as I've done this the last couple of years, going back to the Commodore calculators a couple of years ago, the Unisonic calculators last year, the Texas Instruments SR56 before that, there has been a price spike on eBay as all of you go after them. So I want you to know I have a stack of these ready to sell off. They'll be available next week when the market is hot. But let's see if I can go to sharing my screen and put the presentation up. So here we are. Hey, I even see the little screen there. Excellent.
Go to full screen. Yeah.
There. Eventually he can be taught. So the financial calculators, the first question some of you are asking is almost certainly, why bother? I mean, we're talking compound interest and annuities, things that Richard Schwartz can do in his head. But I want to give you a couple of reasons, pun included, for why we should try to look at the financial calculators. The non-Hewlett-Packard financial calculators, to be exact, well, how about that? There we go. And non-LCD models for the most part. So I'm trying to look at the older models, mid-1970s. We all know about the HP80, the 70, the 22, the 92, which really was the revolutionary model in many ways because it brought accuracy and 5-item time value of money to the desktop. And then later on, the 37 and the 38. So I discuss all these others that are other brands. Well, sometimes the financial models help to pay for the lower volume scientific models. Almost certainly the best-selling calculator of all time will end up being perhaps the 12C, if not some variation of the TI-30. But business people really needed a financial tool that could be on their desktop and were willing to pay for it. After all, most of the time it would be the company buying the model, and it was the boss that was going to pay for it. So the financial models had pretty good margins built into them, and I suspect helped pay for some of the goodies that we all enjoy playing with. And as well because I like to just have that, since I was so used to saying that to my children. From what I can tell, this is the first non-HP financial calculator ever made. That is the Rockwell Unicom 204. A picture of it will show up on the next slide. But one way I have tried to do the research for this comes from the old calculator advertisements presentation that I did last year. Last year's thumb drive that had 1,500 plus images of advertisements from newspapers. I did spend a lot of time over 6 months digging into those newspapers, looking for every calculator type and model that I could find, including some of the financial ones. And by dating those pictures of the images, the advertisements, This one seemed to be the first financial model that showed up in the newspapers. It was not a Hewlett-Packard. This dates from 1974, June 24th. So that's pretty early in the scheme of things. There's a picture of it. This particular calculator, in addition to the very alluring green color scheme suggesting money and riches, had a 4-variable time value of money. I do believe it was the HP 92 that first put in 5 variable time value of money calculations. And the Rockwell was, of course, no exception. Every one of these units I have ever seen has a discolored plastic cover over the display. You can probably see that somewhat in the picture. They're all cloudy, like. If you are looking at the switches at the top, you have on-off switch, and then you have that bus. If you need to call a bus, you flip the switch up, and a bus will drive up to pick you. The business logic simply means that it works more like an adding machine, where you can do 1 plus, 2 plus, 3 plus, and it will accumulate. Algebraic simply means you put the operators in between the numbers. There is no operator precedence on any of these models. If you're going to do any of that, you have to have parentheses. The reason I want to spend a little bit of time on the Rockwell is because the chipset it used is used by a large majority of every other machine I'm going to show you here this morning. You would key in a value to store into a financial register and then press that NT2 or a store button. It's in the top right corner in a light green. So if I wanted to put in a value for the number of periods in, that's the shifted 7 key, you would key in 360, let's say it's 30 years, months. 360, press the enter 2 shift key, more or less, and then press the 7 key. You enter all your values that way, and when you finally want an answer, you press that to an answer light green button, and then the key you want it to compute an answer for. Remnants of that are still found to this day in the TI BA2 Plus calculator models that have lived for 20 years now. So TI saw an innovation they liked and decided to go home and not innovate any further. As I say, the chipset function set in this calculator is found in most models. The time value of money, 4 variable with either an I, a periodic interest rate, or I/year, or an annual interest rate. The other functions that are on this keyboard, I hope you can see it. I hope that's big enough to see. The shift of the decimal point is where you set the decimal the number of places for the decimal point. CA, that's the shift of the clear key in the bottom left corner, is for clear all. It does have cost, margin, and sell calculations. I've really been surprised over the years how often simple relationship is so critical to so many business discussions. Simply, what is the margin on this product that we're selling? All the time that calculation is done. And it's here on what appears to be the first financial model other than the HPs. It had square root, percent, and percent change. Sum and mean, those are the shifts of the plus and minus key. It had sum and mean or average, no standard deviation. It then had trend line prediction and a slope calculation. Those are the shifts of the 1 and the 2 buttons. So watch for that same function set moved around on the next few models. This is a rather thick machine. It runs on 4 AA batteries. It's thick. It was originally made by Unicom, and Rockwell bought Unicom, and that's how they appeared to enter the calculator market. Here I have one put up next to it. This is a Midas made by ColeX. It's also a very, very early financial calculator. And if you look closely, you can see the exact same function set. You have the margin, the sell, and the cost spread out in a few different places. The time value of money, the trend line calculation and the trend, the CS instead of plus minus for change sign, and you have the same enter and compute keys in that top right corner. So that's exactly a clone of that Rockwell 204. These two models seem to share a certain resemblance to each other. I'm still trying to investigate this. The Koalatron is a name we've probably heard before if you've looked at some non-TI, non-financial model. Then the Princetronic. Obviously, Koalatron seems to have made this for Princetronic. That's, again, the exact same function set, just in a different frame, a different calculator body. I guess there was one calculator chipset that was made for financial models. The manufacturers kept buying it and putting it in different cells. I don't know what that number is in the display of the Princetronic. It seemed very financial to me. This one's one of my favorites. It's a small little stainless steel model made by Royal, the 94F. There's a zoomed in picture of the actual keys. If you look, once again, that's exactly the same function set. You're going to get tired of me saying that, but it's going to be true for some time. Those keys have a lovely ability to enter multiple digits at once. It's called efficiency. Press the 7 and get 4 or 5 of them. National Semiconductor entered the market with the financial model here, their model 202. Compared to the models we've seen before, this one has lovely clicking buttons that actually seem to grab onto the key presses very, very nicely. I have yet to have a key press on this model, even today, misread. But once again, Bob, can you fill in the blank here? This has the exact same what?
Field?
Function set.
Function set. Thank you, Jake. That's a really nice feeling machine. I like that one. I like the green displays on financial models. If you're thinking about money, why not make the displays green?
What are the dots for?
That's a reflection on the bottom of the display unit based on how I was taking the picture.
Oh, okay.
Unisonic. I think I showed this one before. I knew that Unisonic had made a financial model. I saw an advertisement of it once in a newspaper ad, had never seen it. This is the only one to this day I have ever seen show up on eBay. My wife thought I was having a fit when I saw it and had to buy it immediately. The function set here is, well, I want to hear the room say it this time. The function set here is
The same.
I'm so glad everyone is still awake since I can't see. Animax made a nice financial model. Interesting light blue, green, and red and black keys. Whoops, I thought I had to zoom in on the Animax for the keys, apparently not. But that is, again, exactly the same function set. Those keys are the same keys that were used in the early Bomars. They are what? The Clixon?
Yeah.
I think, right?
Yes.
So those will make a nice click, but you can still get multiple digit entries off of that one as well. And again, I have no idea what that number is in the display. Here's an Adler 84F. This is almost certainly a clone of that Royal model that I showed earlier in the stainless steel. It had the same numerical model number, 84F. And the keys here are in exactly the same place as the Royal model was. So Adler took the Royal, or Royal took the Adler and put it together. This one's a real sweet one. I really like these guys, the Minuteron. It's also a brand called Anita that makes these kinds. Most of the time you've probably seen the scientific versions of these if you watch on eBay or see them float by. But they had a financial model here as well, the Minuteron 861. Yes, once again, it has the
Same key size.
the down arrow, the green down arrow is what you use to get the value out. You have to get the green F key and the green down arrow, and then your key to get an answer out. I don't know why exactly they didn't just do it the same way. So the shift key so far here is the only real difference between this model and all the rest we have seen so far. Unitrix and Interprex. The Unitrix is probably one of the more handsome models in the sense that if you have this out, you're not ashamed to be seen with it. It has a really nice industrial design. It's got a nice machined stainless steel looking finish to the metal case. The buttons are notoriously unreliable. The reason I put pot on this one is because when I finally got it showing in the display, I didn't want to turn it off. The red LED display on the Unitrix is really very bright. The Interprex shows up quite a bit at advertisements. It's one of the ones that was advertised more frequently, perhaps, than some of the others. It has that horrible, horrible design approach of having two functions on every key written in the shift location above the key. I think that person eventually got a job at Hewlett-Packard in the later days of their interface systems. But that's just horrible. Is that 7 divided by n? Is that what that key does up there? Or what's the deal? Terrible, terrible. Must have been a really bad weekend before somebody decided to do that Monday morning. Kings Point and Sharp. Here's Sharp EL 8300. Apologies for those buttons being somewhat hard to read, but that, once again, exact same function set in the Sharp LC8 EL 8300. It's a very big machine, very big in the hand. Then you have this Kings Point. The Kings Point is finally one that is not following the same function set as everything we have seen so far. The Kings Point has, in fact, very, very few non-financial functions of any kind. You do have at the top in the light brown tan keys your time value of money functions. There is a key shifted above the numeric keys at the bottom for every compounding frequency that is available to you. You press the time shift key at the top, and then 1 if you want annual compounding, time, and 2 for semi-annual. Strangely enough, time and 3 for quarterly. I imagine that caused some trouble. Time 4 for monthly, and so on. The mathematical functions there are parentheses for the first time, and percent and delta percent, and then you have a X to the Y key buried down in the numeric keypad. That's it. So financial functions and essentially a power function. The previous one here, I'll go back to it. If you look at that Kings Point approach to the functions, that is the exact same function approach used by Commodore, their first financial model, on the left side of the screen. You have the key for every compounding frequency. That's not quite exactly the same function set because it has the 1 over X key up at the top next to Y to the X key. But otherwise, it's very, very similar to that Kings Point we saw before. If you were just determined to buy a financial model, the one on the right, the Commodore on the right, is at least something that might have some utility to it compared to any of the ones we've seen so far. Because in addition to doing time value of money, it has a few other useful things in it. It has trend line curve fitting by entering X and Y pairs. You can predict X value given a Y value. You can predict a Y value given an X value. It does mean and sample standard deviation as well as population standard deviation. And this one particularly had powers, square root, and reciprocal. So that's probably the most powerful overall financial model that I have shown on the screen so far. Bob, tell me when people start drooling on their desks, okay?
Sorry, I was drooling.
It's not that attractive a model. Corpus. We all know, I think, probably the Corpus 500. Corpus made a financial model, the Corpus 600 here. I've had one of those and let it slip away from me. This picture comes from the datamath.org website. Thank you to Georg. This is the really probably the first financial model ever developed that did not use the enter and compute key approach. The Commodores I showed you a moment ago did not have that. This one really probably should have been before it. So Corpus figured out how to do financial calculations without dedicated key to enter a financial value, dedicated key to compute a financial value. That's a really nice looking model. It's essentially the Corpus 500 that they always advertised as being better than the HP models or the TI models, but it has the financial calculations built in. As I say, sorry, it did not use the enter or compute logic. Photo courtesy of datamath.org, did not pay me to say that. Omrun made a financial model, the 12F. This model is also one that did not use the enter compute logic. It's rather skimpy on the functions. Has the financial functions, some memory functions, a GPM key at the top by itself, gross profit margin. The entirety of its math functions are a percent key and the y to the x key. However, it has a 12-digit display. Still don't think that's enough to work with the American national debt today, but it's getting closer. When this model is computing a financial result, the screen goes blank and shows all sorts of gibberish on it as it is computing. It's quite an entertaining thing. It makes you want to solve for interest rates just to watch the number flow all around the screen. Novus had two financial models, the financier on the left and then the financier PR, programmable, one of the least capable financial or programmable models the world has ever seen. It remembers keystrokes when you put keys in. You have no ability to see the keystrokes, and it has no branching. It's simply a way to do repetitive calculations and really not know whether you keyed in all the steps correct. Pretty terrible thing. But the Novus financier on the left is the one I think I remember seeing most often when people started having very, very cheap financial machines if they were having to do it in an accounting class or a business class in high school.
The way the PR worked is they National Semiconductor made a chip to add that kind of crude programming to other calculator chips.
Well, that crude is the right word, Eric, but it was a first step for programmability, absolutely. It's terribly, the keys are not very reliable, and the ability to enter a program where you can't tell if it double registered a key is so much less than worthless, it's hard to imagine. But they at least are still working. A couple of the more bizarre financial models are these specific loan arranger models right here. They're relatively tiny, and they have really no other functions other than entering values and computing a loan payment. You cannot compute anything other than a payment on this thing, other than some basic math, of course. But it's a horrible thing to remember how to do it. You have to do these keys and enter them in specific orders that are not intuitive at all. I have to Google whenever I'm trying to put something in it, which is why I gave up and put pi in the display. The Loan Arranger 2 simply got rid of a button. If you look, it's exactly the same, but they got rid of one of the buttons. Kind of odd. Oh, can I hear hisses? One of the reasons I think that the financial market really did take off is because of inexpensive financial models. And these are the three that TI had in the 1977-ish time frame. You've got that ghastly original business analyst on the far left. Who on earth would ever have thought that a business person would like that kind of scheme? I don't know. The one in the middle looks professional. The one on the right, the TI Money Manager, is the financial version of the TI-30, same exact color scheme. If you look at the shift of the open parenthesis key, which is above the 8 in the middle of the screen, you see something that until I got one of these, I had no idea what it was. It says AN-CI. On the original one, had a double quote after. That apparently turned out to be a mode switch to do annuities or compound interest. You had to tell it what kind of problem you were going to be computing by setting a mode for an annuity or a compound interest problem. Weird stuff. It did have the linear regression to compute slope and intercept and to compute an estimated X or estimated Y. So that was really pretty nice feature set to have from a financial model. This is the first financial model that's not Hewlett-Packard, that had natural logarithms and e to the x on it. But these were necessary, I think, in order to continue having interest in financial models, which led to a lot of toys we enjoyed. Another interesting model, you have the clone of the 12C on the right. That one's actually a tech solutions. That's not the one we usually see on eBay showing up, but that's essentially 12C for all practical purposes. You've got to love having the alpha shift key. There's no alpha on the 12C. So to compute e to the x, you enter a number, press alpha, and then e to the x. Some things apparently don't translate well into Chinese. The Texas Instruments on the right was their first programmable model, the TI MBA. It had quite a few quirks with computing very difficult problems where the answers would swing wildly with just a slight change in an input value. That was documented by Palmer Hansen in the TI PPC notes. The programmability was merely the ability to loop endlessly using the reset button, which was essentially go back to step one and keep running. There were no conditional tests or anything else. So I really don't know why that programmability was in there. It's very hard to use in any way. But that was more advanced than any that had come before. Real quickly, a couple of Sharp financial models. The EL5102 at the bottom is a non-programmable, more or less, really, financial model. It's pretty nice in what it can do. The one on the top is the business financial computer, the PC1421. If you're willing to spend the time programming it, that runs circles and capability around the 12C from a programmability standpoint, because you get basic and all of the financial functions built into the basic. So that's really quite sweet. This one is one I want to hiss at. This is the BA2 Plus. The reason it's on here is because this thing originally started with a gold-looking LCD model back in like 1981, and it's still being sold today with essentially the same function set. This is the one that I had to include as keystrokes in the business math book that is on your thumb drive. I don't know if that's been called attention to yet, but this one, the keystrokes for this, it's the reason that some of us kept complaining to Hewlett-Packard about their financial models, because from a college student standpoint, if you want to major in accounting or business or marketing, you still have to take chemistry and perhaps some math classes in the other areas of the university. So what are you going to do? Well, you can buy a Hewlett-Packard 10B, the way it used to be, but for your science classes and your math classes, you had to buy a scientific calculator. You had to buy two. TI figured out much earlier than Hewlett-Packard that we need to have a financial model that has scientific functions built into it. Look above 7, 8, and 9, you see the trig functions. So you can solve triangles in the morning and then do your business math and accounting in the afternoon. HP had that built into the 19B2, but that, of course, was not exactly successful and widespread. The 10B2 Plus that HP now produces runs circles around the BA2 Plus. It's a much more powerful unit. I think there's like almost 20 different features that the 10B2 Plus has that are not in the BA2 Plus. But that's quite the long-running model right there, the BA2 Plus. And there's the HP 10B2 Plus. That's the one I really like, probably the best of any of them we've seen here. I saw that one for sale yesterday in an Office Depot. So it's still in the marketplace, the HP 10B2 Plus. Here's a list of all the models and the dates based on the first advertisements that I had found going through the newspapers online. And you can see, of course, the HP 80 up there in 1973, February 1st. That's when the model was in the newspaper mentioned for the first time, not necessarily its introduction date. Then you have the Rockwell on June the 24th of 74, ColeX that we saw. I'm not going to read all this to you, but the ColeX in November and so on. I tried to also put the initial price that was in the advertisement, and you can see how the prices just collapsed from 1974 all the way down into 1976. Is there any interest in the financial models?
Yeah.
Thank you for that overwhelming response.
I like them.
Well, I'm not, Eric, did you call attention to a couple of the financial-oriented things that are on the thumb drive, the conference thumb drive?
I did mention your videos and also your book.
Okay, not a problem. The videos are there for anybody that suffers from insomnia. They are guaranteed to put you out like a light and save money on prescription medications. But
Change video mode.
What's that?
Change video mode.
Why? Why? Nobody wants to see me.
There you go.
Now I have to see me. This isn't any fun at all.
So Gene, when you demonstrate the calculators, whatever that weird number is that you had in a lot of them, instead of that, you should have some sort of, I don't know, maybe a round number of some kind.
If only I were sitting there to thump you on the head. Now, look, again, the reason I wanted to show these is because this is another piece of history that's disappearing into history rather quickly. And if we don't try to call attention to them and document them, as Richard has always hit me hard with, they will, in fact, disappear. And the financial models do have a place in the past that I want us to remember. So if you have an opportunity, any interest at all, most of the time these are fairly cheap. You can at least get one of them and use it to level a table the way I do. All right, anybody have any questions? I know it's coming up on your lunchtime. I appreciate the opportunity.
Gene, I was surprised there were so many models.
There are quite a few. Those are simply the ones that are in the newspaper advertisements that I happen to have found a real version of. Every one of those that I have, other than that Corpus 600, I actually have the physical unit.
What does a typical one cost?
$20.
Advertised?
Usually about $20 would be a good bet for picking one up off of eBay. It's so hard to find, however, because if you do a search for business calculator, you're going to get 100,000 printing desktop adding machines. If you do financial calculator, you'll probably want to exclude Texas Instruments. Otherwise, you'll get 10,000 BA2 Plus models that are for sale. So it just depends on whether you are interested in trying to track one of them down. The Rockwell is probably historically the most significant because it has the, well, I was hoping to make it go to it. It has the placement of being the first one other than the HPs that I had found in the newspapers. So take a look. You might find something interesting. Bad puns are no charge.
Hey, Gene, what
Listen,
about,
everyone have a great rest of the conference. I hope to see everyone next year when we do it again.
You
thank you, Gene.